I remember the night clearly, though I've tried to forget it. The fog hung thick over the empty streets, curling around the dim porch lights like smoke. Inside, the house was unnervingly still, every corner swallowed by shadows that flickered under the soft glow of a single lamp. I sat on the couch, blanket pulled tight, listening to the faint hum of the old heater and the occasional creak of floorboards, though no one was moving. Outside, the trees swayed without wind, branches scratching lightly against the window. Then came a soft rustling from the hallway, almost imperceptible, like someone brushing past without a sound. I told myself it was imagination, nerves, or the house settling. But the book on the table shivered and tipped, spilling open with pages fluttering like wings. My heartbeat thumped so loudly it felt like it might echo in the walls. I froze, staring into the darkness at the hallway, and that's when I saw it. The grass was wet. Fog pressed low across the yard. It clung to the edges of the porch light, glowing faintly. I stood there for a long time, breath quiet, hands curled in my sleeves. The swing set was waiting. 2 old chains, rusted, seats pale from the weather, but they moved, not much, just enough. The air was still, I could feel it, no breeze. Yet the swing shifted, forward, then back, slow, deliberate. I thought maybe an animal had brushed past, or maybe the ground tilted with the weight of the fog, but the rhythm held, like breathing, like something alive. I leaned against the post of the porch. The wood was damp and it bent slightly under me. I didn't want to go closer. That's when I heard it. A faint brush of sound, like laughter, carried low inside the fog. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't loud, just a whisper, almost kind. My eyes fixed on the empty swing. The chains trembled, the seat curved higher. I thought of children, but the house had been empty for years. No one played here anymore. The shadows didn't fall right. The porch light reached only so far. But the swing's shadow seemed to stretch, longer. Out into the fog, into shapes I didn't recognize. I stepped down onto the grass. Cold slipped through my shoes. The earth felt soft, sinking slightly. Each step closer. The laughter faded, replaced by silence so heavy I could hear my pulse in my ears. The left swing stopped. The right one didn't. It carried on, steady, forward and back. I reached the edge of the set. Rust smeared the chains. I smelled the iron in the air. For a moment, I thought I saw fingers, small, pale, tightening around the chain. But when I blinked, the swing was empty. The seat tilted sideways, as if someone had just slipped away. The fog pulled tighter around the frame. I couldn't see the fence anymore. The silence was too complete. Even the crickets had stopped. Even the wind seemed gone. And then the chain creaked. Not from the motion. It was as if something heavier leaned in, pressing its weight against the iron. A slow groan that carried into my chest. I looked down. The ground beneath the swing was darker than the rest. Not shadow, not grass. It looked hollow, as if the soil itself had thinned, sunk into a shape. The swing slowed, the rhythm broke, and with it, the faintest breath, as if released from lungs that weren't there. I stepped back. I wanted distance, but the fog followed, curling around my legs, clinging as if it knew me. The porch light flickered, once, twice. When it steadied, the swings were still, completely still. The shadows had gone. The hollow in the earth was fading. Only grass remained, but the air had thickened. I breathed shallow, like the yard itself was watching me. I waited. 1 long minute. 2. Nothing moved, not the fog, not the light. I turned slowly back toward the porch, my footsteps quiet on the grass. But behind me, the chain trembled again, soft, barely there, and I swear, I heard it once more. That laugh. Thin, distant, but meant for me. I didn't look back. Not fully. Just enough to see the swing had begun again. A hollow arc. Forward, back. No one there. Just the rhythm and the waiting silence. I closed the door behind me, but even inside, I could feel it. The yard wasn't empty. It never had been. The house was old, timber bones, narrow halls that held the chill even when the days were warm. At night, everything seemed sharper. The creak of floorboards, the faint sigh of the walls, and something else, the knocking. It began soft. So soft I thought it was inside my head. A dull thud, irregular, almost like a heartbeat trapped in the ceiling. I would lie still in bed, staring at the pale glow of the window, waiting for it to fade, but it never did. Each night, the rhythm grew clearer, measured, slow, as if someone was waiting. I remember sitting up one night, the blankets heavy around me, my breath caught in my throat, because the knocking was no longer faint. It echoed down the stairwell, from the attic, above me, and the sound didn't stop when I noticed it. It grew louder. I rose carefully, bare feet against the cold floor, the boards flexing under my weight. Every step felt like I was answering a call. The stairs to the second floor were narrow. I knew them well. But that night, they stretched long, each one groaning under me as though the house disliked my movement. The knocking paused when I reached the landing. Silence thickened. I held my breath. And then, 1, 2, 3 deliberate knocks. They came from the attic door at the end of the hall. A pale strip of light leaked beneath it. I knew that light shouldn't exist. There was no lamp in the attic, no window either. My legs felt stiff. Still, I walked. The hallway shadows dragged along the walls. They seemed longer than they should have been. The closer I came, the stranger the air felt. Not cold, not warm, but heavy, as if the space itself was pressing down on me. I reached the door. It was open, just a crack, wide enough for breath to slip through. I was certain I hadn't left it that way. I never opened the attic. No reason to. Nothing inside but dust. But the door was waiting. I pushed it gently. The hinges answered with a low groan. Inside, the attic yawned dark. Dust hung like mist in the pale strip of light. I stood at the threshold, listening. The knocking had stopped. Only the silence remained. I whispered a small word, just my own name, to prove I was still there. The air swallowed it whole. I stepped inside. The boards creaked sharply beneath me. And in that moment, the attic felt alive, not with movement, but with attention, like something unseen was watching, listening, waiting for me to make another mistake. I scanned the corners. Nothing, just boxes, old trunks, shadows stacked on shadows. But then, I saw it. On the far wall, a shape stretched unnaturally long, thin, crooked, though there was nothing to cast it. I froze. The shadow twitched, and then, slowly, it shrank back into the darkness. The silence deepened. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. I couldn't. I backed away. Careful steps, one by one. When I reached the doorframe, the knocking returned, right behind me. A single strike against the wall. I ran, down the hall, down the stairs, the sound chasing me until I reached my room. I shut the door, locked it, pressed my back against it until my lungs burned. The house fell quiet again, utterly quiet. I told myself I imagined it, that it was just the house settling, old wood, tricks of the mind, but that was a lie. I knew it. Because the next night, the knocking came again, softer, steadier, patient, like it was waiting for me to answer the door, and sometimes When I closed my eyes, I swore I felt it. A faint vibration. Beneath the bed, beneath the floor, as though the house itself had a heartbeat. The house was quiet. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, and the faint ticking of a clock I couldn't see. The hallway stretched ahead of me, narrow, dim. The wallpaper faded to a color I couldn't quite name. At night, that hallway always felt longer, as if it stretched while I slept. A corridor that wanted me to walk through it, and at the end of it. The mirror. A tall oval mirror, hung higher than it needed to be, its frame chipped with age, silver peeling away in thin, curling flakes. I didn't like it, but I could never move it. Every time I thought about taking it down, my chest tightened, as if it belonged exactly where it was. That night the air was colder than usual. My bare feet pressed against the floorboards, and I felt the faint draft moving across the hallway. Like a whisper carried in from somewhere unseen. The mirror caught my eye. It always did, even when I didn't mean to look at it. It drew me in. I slowed my steps, and I realized my reflection wasn't matching me. I blinked once. The reflection blinked a second later. I lifted my hand. It lingered, suspended, as if unsure whether to follow. My chest tightened. I leaned closer. The glass was not perfectly clean. It was cloudy, streaked, but behind that fog, something moved. Not me, not a trick of light. Something pale stood just behind my reflection. Faded, blurry, watching. I froze. It didn't. It leaned forward as if pressing closer to the glass. My breath fogged the surface, and for a moment it looked like the pale figure breathed with me. The angles of the hallway and the glass were wrong, too long, too sharp. The corners bending toward me like arms. I whispered aloud without meaning to. "Hello?" The pale figure didn't move. Its face was obscured, but I knew its eyes were fixed on me. Waiting. I reached out. My fingers hovered just above the glass, close enough to feel the cold bleed into my skin. My reflection followed. Late again, sluggish, but the pale figure remained still. No blink, no shift, no recognition, only silence. The house seemed to still around me. The clock stopped ticking. The hum in the kitchen faded. Even my breath felt quieter. The mirror was the only thing alive. I pressed my fingertip against it. Cold, but deeper than cold, like touching ice that had no end. And then, a ripple, subtle, like the glass had moved just enough to disturb the surface. The figure leaned closer. Not my reflection, the other one. For the first time, I thought I saw the shape of its mouth. A thin, dark line, curved upward. A smile. I staggered back, nearly tripping on the hallway rug. But the mirror held me. I couldn't look away. My reflection blinked again, too slow, delayed. It wasn't catching up anymore. It was falling behind, and for a breathless moment, I saw something else. The pale figure's hand resting on my reflection's shoulder. Not mine, not real, but still there, inside the warped glass world. I didn't touch the mirror again. I didn't walk down that hallway for the rest of the night. But even now, when I pass it in daylight with the house full of ordinary sounds, I feel it watching, waiting. My reflection always just a moment too late, and behind it, the pale figure still lingers, silent, still, smiling faintly, as if it knows something I don't. The house was quiet. It always was, this late in the night. The streets outside were empty, only the pale glow of a street lamp against the frosted window. The kind of silence where even your own breathing feels intrusive. I sat at the table, an empty mug in front of me. The clock on the wall ticked, soft and steady, and then The kitchen floor shifted. Not a groan of settling wood. Not the wind brushing the walls. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Crossing the linoleum just beyond where I sat. I froze. I didn't turn my head. It was too clear to dismiss. Each step pressed into the boards as if weight was there. But there wasn't. The light above me flickered. A low hum drifted from the refrigerator, deeper than usual. Like the machine was straining, I could almost feel the vibration through the chair. The smell reached me next. Burnt, a charred edge, sharp and bitter. But the counter was clean. The toaster hadn't been used in days. Still, the scent curled in the air, faint, insistent. Like someone had just pulled bread out too late, left it blackened. The footsteps circled. I could feel the shift in the boards. Not just heard it, but sensed the weight move closer, then back again. I tried to steady my breath, but each inhale sounded harsh in the quiet. The fridge hummed louder. The overhead bulb flickered again, washing the room in pale bursts of light. Every time the darkness pressed in, I thought I saw movement, a shadow leaning against the cabinets, gone when the light steadied. The smell of toast thickened, clinging to the back of my throat. I looked at the clock. Its hands trembled, the second hand jerking, not smooth anymore. Something was wrong. The steps didn't stop. They fell into rhythm, crossing the same stretch of floor over and over, as though pacing, as though waiting. I thought of standing, walking out, leaving the mug on the table and shutting the door. But the moment I shifted, the steps halted. Silence. Not silence exactly. The fridge hummed, too loud, too strained. The bulb buzzed faintly, trying not to die, but the absence of those steps, that was worse. I waited, my fingers pressed against the wood grain of the table, grounding myself. The surface felt cold, colder than it should have been. And then, one step, just one, right behind me. I closed my eyes. The air shifted, heavy, pressing close to the back of my neck. Not a breath, but something near it. I turned slowly, inch by inch, expecting to see nothing. The kitchen stood empty, chairs pushed in, counter bare. But the bulb above swayed gently, though no window was open. The hum of the refrigerator dropped to a strange, low pitch, a growl beneath the normal noise. And the smell, it was stronger than ever, as though the room itself had burned. I looked at the floor. The tiles were pale, clean, but in certain flickers of the light, I thought I saw prints, dark impressions scattered like soot. Here, then gone, like the idea of footprints. The steps resumed, not where I looked, always from the edges of the room, shifting, circling, waiting just beyond reach. I whispered to myself that it wasn't real, that I was tired, that the house was old, but the smell wouldn't leave, the flicker wouldn't stop, and the pacing went on, as if the kitchen belonged to something else, and I was the one intruding. Minutes blurred, or hours. The clock hands twitched, frozen between seconds. I sat there, unmoving, listening, breathing shallow, and somewhere between the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of the unseen steps, the thought settled into me. This kitchen wasn't entirely here. Not anymore. It was caught, suspended between what I knew and something else. A place overlapping, where silence and footsteps shared the same air, and no matter how still I sat, I knew the pacing would never stop. Not while I stayed. Not while the lights flickered above. Not while the burnt scent lingered, curling faintly through every breath I took. The room holds the weight of footsteps that never arrive. And some nights, it feels like I never left that chair. It was autumn. The air was colder than it should have been. The house seemed to carry every draft through its bones. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed. The floorboards beneath me gave off a faint groan. I had grown used to that sound, but not the other one. It was a whisper, soft, my name, drawn out like breath on glass. At first, I thought it was outside, wind curling through the trees maybe, but the window was shut. I froze. The whisper came again, this time from the closet. The door was barely open. A slim crack of darkness cut through the pale glow of the lamp, the kind of black that feels too heavy to belong in a bedroom. My chest tightened. I waited. The house around me was still, then the breath. Close, circling, like someone exhaling in the dark just beyond the doorframe. The hairs along my arms lifted. I leaned closer. The whisper brushed against me once more. My name. I could feel it inside my ribs. A quiet murmur, vibrating through me, not just around me. I swallowed, though my throat was dry. The doorknob looked dull in the half-light. Old brass, cold to the touch when I finally reached for it. My fingers hesitated. The whisper stopped. The silence was worse. Heavy, like something holding its breath, waiting for me to move. I pulled the door open. Slowly. The hinges gave out a sigh that seemed far too loud in that still room. Inside. Nothing. Just coats hanging limp on their hooks. Shadows pooling on the floor. An emptiness that mocked me. But it wasn't empty. The air was too thick, like walking into fog without seeing it. Each breath dragged against me. I stepped back. The closet seemed darker with the door open, and I felt eyes, not in front of me, not above, but around. The feeling of being circled, watched from angles I couldn't turn to face. It prickled my skin, slow and deliberate. I whispered into the dark. No answer came, but the silence shifted. The coats swayed, barely, like someone brushing past them with a hand I couldn't see. The whisper rose again, this time closer, not from the closet, behind me. I turned, but the room was empty. The lamp flickered once. The shadows stretched long, as though reaching for me. And then, stillness. I stood in that thin space between the closet and the rest of the room, not able to close the door, not able to step inside. The breath lingered at my ear. I could feel it, cool and damp, though no one was there. I backed away slowly, each step dragging against the silence. The closet door remained open. I slept with the lamp on, eyes fixed on that darkness, waiting for the whisper to call my name again. It never did, but the feeling never left. Even now, sometimes the air thickens around me, and I know the closet is still listening. It was late, the kind of late where silence feels heavier than sleep. I was in bed staring at the ceiling. The house was still, but not empty. Then I noticed it. A faint glow, seeping from beneath the bedroom door. It wasn't steady. It pulsed. Slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat pressed against the floor. I froze. I don't know how long I just watched it. Each flicker stretched the shadows on my wall. Thin, warped shapes crawling across the ceiling. The glow didn't belong here. It was too bright, too alive, and still, no sound. I sat up, holding my breath. The air felt thicker, as though the room had been sealed shut. Even my own chest felt reluctant to rise. The light swelled again, and again, every beat dragging the shadows longer, sharper, until they didn't look like shadows anymore. They looked like figures, bent, waiting. I whispered to myself, just a breath, that it was probably the hallway bulb. But I knew. I knew no bulb in this house ever flickered like that. The glow deepened, then faded, then deepened again. Always in rhythm, always alive. I slid my feet to the floor. The boards beneath me groaned as though warning me not to move. But I did. I leaned closer to the door. The glow pressed against the wood. So close I thought I could feel warmth seeping through. I stretched out my hand. It trembled before I even touched the handle. The moment my fingers brushed it, the door rattled, a soft shake. Like someone on the other side breathing against it. I staggered back. The glow brightened, filling every crack around the frame. Even the keyhole shimmered with pale light. My heart tried to match its rhythm, beat for beat, but it was too slow, too heavy. The rattling stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I leaned forward again, not touching the door. Just listening, nothing, and yet I could hear it. Not with my ears, but in my bones, the house. It was shifting, breathing. The walls seemed to swell just slightly, like lungs drawing in. The ceiling dipped. The floor rose beneath my bare feet. I whispered again. Not words this time, just a sound, to prove I still existed. The glow flared, and the shadows on the ceiling twisted. They turned in unison, bending toward me. Not figures anymore. Faces. Hollow, stretched faces. Pressed into the walls, peering down. The hum inside the silence grew louder. A vibration in the air, like the steady thrum of something buried deep beneath the floor. I wanted to run, but the house had closed in. Every corner breathed. Every surface leaned closer. The glow under the door swelled one final time. Bright enough to turn the whole frame white. I thought the door would burst open, but it didn't. It only sighed, a long exhale that pressed against me, as if the house had acknowledged me, claimed me. The light dimmed. The shadows folded back into their corners, and I was left in darkness again. But the silence didn't return. The rhythm stayed, slow, pulsing, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Echoing inside the walls, and when I finally lay back down, the mattress rose slightly beneath me, as though the house was still breathing. The night was pale. Fog pressed hard against the windows, though the air outside had been dry all day. I lay in bed staring at the faint outline of the curtains, too heavy to close my eyes. Then, a cold breath brushed the back of my neck. I froze. My blanket was tucked tight under my chin. No window was open, and still it lingered, as if someone had leaned close, just to remind me I wasn't alone. The air smelled damp, not the crisp damp of rain, but the earthy weight of wet soil. It clung to the back of my throat, and the more I tried to ignore it, the stronger it became. I turned slowly, expecting to see the outline of someone in the dark. But the space beside me was empty, only the faint hum of silence pressing back against the fog. I pulled the blanket over my head, breathed into the warmth, waited for my chest to settle. But again, the cold drifted in, slipping through the fabric, brushing the hair behind my ear. It felt deliberate, like someone exhaling. Soft, slow, patient. I sat up. The room swayed with shadow. Each corner looked softer than it should, blurred by the pale light filtering through the fog. I listened. No footsteps. No creak of the floorboards. Just the still weight of silence. I left the bed, bare feet on the wood, and walked toward the hallway where the air seemed heavier, colder. The walls held that strange, damp smell. Mud, roots, and stone, though the night outside was dry. Each breath I took seemed not entirely my own. Like something else inhaled with me, the hallway stretched farther than it should. Pictures on the wall leaned slightly, their glass faces catching a faint ripple of light. I passed each one slowly, watching for movement behind the reflection. Halfway down, there it was again. That soft breath against the back of my neck, I turned sharply, only to meet the empty corridor behind me. Stillness, but the air trembled, as though someone had just stepped out of sight. I pressed my hand against the wall. It was cold, damp, slick, like stone inside a cave. Moisture clung to my skin, though the paint looked dry. I whispered to myself, just to break the silence, but the words felt muted, smothered before they left my lips. I moved on. Room to room. Every door stood open, though I knew I had closed them earlier. The kitchen light flickered faintly, though the switch was off. The scent was strongest there. Earth, rot, a wetness that didn't belong. I stepped across the tiles, each one cold under my feet. The window over the sink was misted, fog pressing against the glass from the outside in. And faintly, just faintly, a breath rose from behind me. This time I didn't turn. I felt it close, closer than before. It traced the line of my jaw, slid against my cheek. And for a moment it almost sounded like a word. I shut my eyes, stood still with the fog pressing, the silence humming, the air cold against my skin. When I opened them again, the reflection in the window wasn't mine. It was softer, pale, blurred. A face I didn't know, and yet it leaned exactly where I stood, exhaling slowly, fogging the glass from the inside. My heart stalled. The reflection didn't vanish, didn't blink. It only breathed. I stepped back, and the face stayed, still close, still exhaling, though my chest wasn't moving at all. I turned, desperate to see someone standing there, but the kitchen was empty. Only the faintest drift of cold brushing my shoulder as if something unseen had just walked past. I left the lights behind, returned to the hall, to the stairs, to my room. The smell followed, the damp weight of soil, the breath that wasn't mine. I lay back in bed. The fog clung outside the glass. The silence pressed down, heavier than before. And when I closed my eyes, the cold touched me again. Only this time it didn't leave. It lingered, slow and patient, like someone had settled beside me in the dark and decided to stay. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered, narrow, cold. The walls faded into pale shadows, the kind that swallowed detail and gave nothing back. The light above me flickered, once, then again. Never steady, always a beat off, like a broken pulse. In those brief flashes, I thought I saw the edges of things move. Not directly in front of me, not where I was looking, but at the corners, where the eye pretends not to notice. I stopped walking. Silence pressed tight against my ears, so heavy. It felt like I had been dropped beneath water. The light shuddered again, and in that quick flicker, the picture frame on the wall was tilted, crooked. I knew it hadn't been before. My throat tightened. I didn't want to touch it. Didn't want to prove the change was real. I took one step further. The floor groaned like something asleep had been disturbed. And then, tap. Far down the hallway, soft, measured. One tap. Then nothing. The next flicker. The frame was straight again. I swallowed hard. My breath fogged in the air, though the heater had been running. That hallway was colder than the rest of the house. Colder than it should have been. Another flicker. The carpet seemed darker, the color shifting like shadows spilled across it. When the light steadied, it was normal again. I rubbed my arms. Every part of me wanted to look back, but I didn't. The pull was only forward, deeper. The silence grew until it had weight, a low pressure at the sides of my head, the kind that makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. Another flicker. And this time, someone was standing at the very end of the hall. Or maybe not standing, maybe only shaped like it. A figure made of nothing but absence. When the light steadied, it was gone. I whispered to myself without meaning to. Just a broken word, please. Another tap. Closer now. The kind of sound that makes the body freeze, no matter how much you want to move. The light hummed above, buzzing like an insect caught inside glass. It flickered faster. The rhythm uneven. Each burst of dark carried a shift. The vase on the side table. Gone. The rug pulled an inch to the left. The wallpaper peeling where it hadn't before. My chest hurt. The air was so heavy it felt like it wanted me still. Pinned. Another flicker. The picture frames down the hallway, all turned inward. Faces hidden, then steady light again. Everything perfect. As if untouched, I pressed a hand to the wall. The plaster was damp, breathing, not with me, but against me. Like something on the other side was leaning back. I closed my eyes, only for a second. But in that second, the light went out completely. Dark. Not natural dark, but thick. A dark that had edges. And in that silence, the taps were no longer far away. They were right in front of me, just a few steps ahead. When the light came back, the hallway looked shorter. The end closer, but I hadn't moved. Another flicker. The figure was back, half seen, shaped like me. I tried to breathe quietly, but the breath was too loud. Each exhale scraped the silence raw. The light steadied once more. The hallway empty. And then, for the first time, no hum, just stillness. A silence that felt final. I waited. Every second stretched long, too long, until I realized I couldn't hear my own breathing anymore. The hallway in front of me rippled faintly like heat rising from pavement. But it was cold. So cold. And for a moment I thought I understood. The hallway wasn't leading to anywhere at all. It was opening into something else. The light flickered one last time, and when it steadied, the hallway was empty again. Completely still. Completely ordinary, but the silence didn't lift. It stayed heavy, as if waiting for me to take another step, and I haven't. Not yet. It was late autumn. The air in the house carried a damp chill. Every room seemed to breathe in silence. I remember standing at the bottom of the narrow staircase, the one that led up to the attic, a place I never really went. The wooden steps looked darker than the rest of the house. Dust clung to the edges, as if time itself had stopped there. I had heard it first. A faint drag, like fabric brushing against wood. Too slow to be a mouse. Too steady to be the wind. Something was waiting. Above me, I climbed anyway. Each step gave a low groan beneath my weight. The railing trembled faintly under my grip. When I reached the top, I pushed the attic door. It didn't swing open. It resisted, as if something leaned against the other side. Then suddenly it gave way, and I was swallowed into the attic's air, the smell of dust, old wood, and something faintly metallic, like rust. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, but it didn't glow. The only light came from a pale slit in the roof, moonlight spilling across the floorboards. Dust floated in that light, tiny specks, suspended like pale ghosts, each one moving as if the air was alive around them. I heard the floor creak again, but I hadn't moved. That's when I saw it, in the far corner, beyond the boxes and old trunks, a shape darker than the dark around it. It wasn't still. It shifted, as if breathing. A shadow, detached from anything that could cast it. I froze, my chest tight, my breath shallow. Every instinct told me to leave, but I couldn't turn away. The shadow leaned slightly, almost like it knew I was watching, and then it moved, not toward me, but across the wall, gliding, as though testing the edges of the light. The dust seemed to scatter in its path. The air grew heavier, thicker. The silence stretched, pulling against my ears. I took one step forward. The floor moaned, and immediately the shadow halted. It was listening. It was waiting. The attic no longer felt empty. Something filled it. Something unseen. Watching, I whispered to myself. A soundless question. Why are you here? The shadow stretched again, elongating, twisting, until it reached the corner where the moonlight faded. It hovered there, silent, expectant. My legs felt weak, but I moved closer. Every step pulled another creak from the boards, each sound answered by a subtle ripple in the darkness, like it was responding. I stopped only a few feet away, close enough to smell the wood, close enough to feel the cold radiating from that corner. The shadow pulsed once, as if drawing in a breath. Then the attic went still. The creaks stopped. The drifting dust seemed to hang frozen in the air, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't alone with it. There was something behind me, low, slow, a weight shifting the boards. I turned, but the pale light had grown dimmer. The slit in the roof seemed narrower now, as if the house itself wanted me blind. The shadow was no longer in the corner. It was everywhere. A faint veil across the ceiling, a smudge along the boxes, a line beneath my feet. I couldn't tell where it began or where it ended. I couldn't tell if it was moving closer, or if I was already inside it. The silence pressed harder. My breath felt like the only sound left in the world. Each inhale, fragile. Each exhale, too loud. I thought of leaving, of turning, running down the stairs, but the floor beneath me shifted before I could move. Like a hand pressed down gently, pinning me in place. I looked back at the corner. The shadow had gathered again. A tight shape, small, almost crouched. It was waiting for me to blink. I felt it. It wanted the space between moments of sight. I didn't blink. My eyes burned. Tears gathered at the edges. But I stared, and the longer I stared, the more I thought I saw something inside it. Not empty, not hollow, a face. Or something close to a face. No eyes, just a pale curve where a mouth should be. A mouth closed. I waited for it to open, but it never did. The attic grew colder. The dust fell straight down, heavy, as if pulled. The silence thickened until I could hear my own pulse. Then, without warning, the shadow sank back, flattening against the boards, sliding into the cracks between them until there was nothing left. I stood alone again, but the air still held its weight. The silence, still too heavy. I backed away, step by step. The door frame felt like safety. But even as I left, even as the attic shrank behind me, I felt the quiet press against my spine, like it hadn't gone, like it had only learned me, and it would wait again. For when I returned, the house was quiet that evening. September air pressed against the windows, carrying the smell of wet leaves. I had left the living room dim, only a pale lamp flickering in the corner. I was making tea in the kitchen. That's when I heard it. A melody. Soft. Fragile. Threading its way down the hallway. It took me a moment to place it. The song belonged to the music box, but it shouldn't have. It had been packed away for years. Wrapped in cloth. Hidden in a drawer, yet here it was. Playing. The notes stretched in ways I didn't remember. Some lingered too long, bending like a voice caught between breaths. Others trembled, as though the tiny mechanism struggled to move. I stood in the doorway. The living room was still. Shadows leaned across the carpet. The music box rested on the shelf. Its lid was open. The ballerina twirled in stiff, uneven circles. My chest tightened. I hadn't wound it. No one had. I stepped closer. The melody warped as if noticing me. The air grew heavy, humming faintly inside my ears. I froze halfway across the room. For just a second, I thought I saw something in the shadows. They didn't sit still. They bent, shifted. Long faces, thin mouths, drifting at the edge of the pale lamplight. The notes faltered, slowed. The ballerina twisted with jerks that didn't match the rhythm anymore. I whispered, though no one was there. Stop! And it did. The lid shut with a sudden click. The silence that followed was louder than the song. I waited, expecting something else, but the room only stared back at me. Still, the warmth had gone. It felt drained, like the space around me had been hollowed out. I touched the lamp. The glass was cold. Colder than it should have been. I looked at the shelf. The music box sat perfectly still, as though it hadn't moved in years. Its polished wood reflected the dim light in faint, broken smears. I knew it was impossible. Yet I couldn't shake the thought that something had been inside that melody. Something had pressed against it, stretching each note, making room for a voice that never came through. I turned away, but I couldn't stop listening. Even in the silence, I swore I heard the echo of its song. A faint hum tucked deep in the walls. The tea had gone cold in the kitchen. I didn't drink it. That night, when I lay in bed, the stillness pressed closer than the dark. My ears waited for a sound I hoped wouldn't return. But in the soft blur of half-sleep, I thought I saw her. The ballerina. Not twirling, not turning. Just standing in the corner of my room. The next morning, the music box was gone. Only a pale circle of dust remained on the shelf. And the silence was heavier than before. The night was still. Too still, I was lying awake, staring at the pale glow that seeped in from the window. The curtains hung loose, barely stirring, though the air was heavy and unmoving. It was late summer, but the air felt cold, colder than it should have been. I kept my eyes on that window. Something about it pulled at me, as if waiting for me to notice. The fabric shifted. Not from the wind. It was softer. Like fingertips brushing across the cloth, the folds rippled once, then stilled. I held my breath. The room was silent. But then it happened again, a slow, deliberate sway, as though someone was standing just behind the curtain, just out of view. The shadows stretched across the floor. They moved strangely, not like fabric in motion, They slithered, my heart thudded, but I didn't move. The sheets pressed heavy against me. I felt pinned there, staring. There was no breeze, no open vent, no reason at all for that curtain to move, and yet it did. I strained my ears. The silence was thick. Then, under it, a faint breath, barely there. But real. It wasn't mine. I was too still, too afraid. It came again, slow, drawn out, hovering at the edge of the night. I swallowed, but the sound in my throat felt loud. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't look away. The curtain lifted at the bottom, just an inch, then dropped again. My chest ached with the weight of the moment. The air seemed to hum. Another breath. Softer. Closer. I wanted to believe it was in my head, a trick of nerves. But the curtain answered me, swaying in rhythm, as if responding, and then it stopped. All at once, the fabric hung still. Dead still, the silence thickened. I felt the absence of that breath, as if someone had stepped back into the shadows and was waiting. I whispered my own name, quiet, almost involuntary, as though checking if my voice would still work. The sound didn't belong to me. It felt foreign in the room, my skin prickled. The shadows on the floor no longer matched the lines of the curtain. They stretched farther, thinner, like fingers. I blinked hard. When my eyes opened again, they were gone, only the fabric. Still. Heavy in the pale light. I forced myself to listen. Nothing. Not even the ticking of the clock. The world had gone hollow, as if the room itself was holding its breath. I waited. Minutes passed. Or maybe seconds. Time didn't feel right anymore. Then, the curtain rustled once more, but this time, only at the very top, like something was pressing against it from above. Tracing downward, the line moved, slow, dragging. The fabric dipped, as if weighed down by an unseen hand. I felt it in my chest before I saw it. A pressure, a knowing. I gripped the sheets tighter. My nails dug into the fabric, and then it stopped. The curtain fell back into place. No more rustling, no more breath, only stillness. The pale square of moonlight. And me, awake, listening, waiting for it to move again, but it never did. The curtain stayed still, and yet, I never stopped feeling that someone was behind it, watching, quietly, patient, waiting for me to sleep. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a late autumn night. The clock in the hallway ticked faintly. Each second dragged, brittle and hollow. I sat in the living room, wrapped in a blanket. The pale glow from the lamp pressed against the window pane. Beyond the glass, fog gathered. It clung to the street outside. Not drifting the way fog should, but thickening like water poured slowly into a bowl, filling every corner. I watched my own reflection in the window, still and faintly doubled by the glass. My face hovered there, suspended in the dark. But then, it blinked and disappeared. The blanket slipped from my hands, because suddenly there was no reflection at all, only the fog. A wall of gray seeping against the glass. My breath slowed. I leaned forward, searching for myself, but the window offered nothing. It was like staring into liquid. The hum of the heater turned faint. Every sound dulled. And then, something whispered, so close I felt it in my ear. Urgent, fast, but the words were tangled. A voice unraveling itself in threads I couldn't catch. I froze, afraid to turn, afraid to listen harder. The whisper kept circling, brushing the back of my neck, and then it was gone. Silence fell so heavy it felt wet. The kind of silence that presses into your chest. I turned, slowly, and my reflection was back. But wrong. The glass showed me yes, but the blanket wasn't around my shoulders. It was folded neatly on the couch. Behind me, the reflection smiled faintly. My lips hadn't moved. I stared at it unblinking. My pulse steady but deep, like it had dropped lower in my body. The reflection tilted its head, just a fraction too far. The fog behind it thickened. Gray, almost black, and in that black, shapes moved. Not human, not clear, just slow currents, like something shifting beneath water. I blinked. The image steadied. My reflection was still smiling. The blanket was still behind me. I pressed my hand to the glass. The reflection didn't follow. Its hand stayed in its lap. Still, my fingers touched cold, wet glass. As if the fog had already soaked through, I drew back quickly. The reflection's smile widened, just slightly, enough to make me feel it knew something. I whispered to myself, softly, "You're tired." You're imagining it, but in the silence. My own whisper didn't sound like mine. It echoed strangely, thin, metallic. I backed away from the window. But the reflection leaned closer, its face filling the glass. Its eyes paler, almost empty. I felt the room tilt, the air pressing tighter against me, and then the lamp flickered, a dim pulse of light. The reflection vanished again. The window went dark. Just fog, thick, moving, as if breathing. The whisper returned. This time slower, still unintelligible, but heavier. I stepped back until I reached the hallway. I couldn't look away. The fog curled against the glass. Fingers of gray pressing inward. For a moment I thought the window might break. But it didn't. The heater clicked off. Silence deepened again, and when I dared to glance one last time, my reflection was there, sitting perfectly still, smiling faintly, but the blanket was not on the couch anymore. It was back around its shoulders, tighter, as if holding it in place. I touched my own arm. Bare. The blanket was gone. But only in my world. The reflection tilted its head once more. Eyes locked on mine, and then the lamp steadied. The glass darkened. My face faded back into place. Normal, almost. I sat there a long time, listening to the silence. The fog outside never moved away. And sometimes even now. When I passed that window at night, I noticed the blanket, folded, unfolded, never quite where I left it. The night was still. No wind, no insects. Just the hush of late autumn pressing against the house. I had been awake too long. The clock ticked in uneven strokes, and I could hear my own pulse echoing through my ears. That was when I noticed the walls. At first, I thought it was my eyes adjusting to the dark. Shadows stretching where they shouldn't, corners bending slightly inward. But no, the wallpaper itself seemed to flex. A subtle swell, a retreat. Almost like breath, I held mine, waiting. The pale strip of moonlight across the floor trembled as if stirred by a draft. But there were no windows open. No doors moving. The walls pulsed again, in rhythm with me, not with the clock, not with the silence outside. With me. I pressed my hand to the plaster, cold, yet beneath it, faint movement. A shiver ran through my fingertips, like touching skin that was trying not to flinch. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses shift, wood expands, but this wasn't wood. This was different. Dust hung in the air, unsettled. It didn't fall straight as it should. It swirled in looping patterns, spirals too deliberate to be chance, as though the room was exhaling. I sat back in the chair, afraid to lean against the wall. Every breath I took, I waited for its reply. And it came. The same expansion, the same hush of stillness collapsing inward again. The low hum began then, faint, not from any direction. It seemed to rise out of the floorboards, coil up into my ribs, and hum inside my bones. I pressed my ear to the air, searching for the source. It didn't change. Louder, softer, always the same, as if the silence itself had chosen a note. The wallpaper fluttered. Just the edge where it met the corner. It lifted slightly, as if stirred by a hidden breath behind it. I told myself it was nothing, but I couldn't look away. The rhythm became clearer. Not random, not a trick. It followed the push of my blood. I touched my wrist, felt the throb, and watched as the walls swelled with it. They were alive, and they were listening. The dust thickened, drifting toward me. No air stirred, yet the motes swam closer, pulling together as if drawn by magnetism. They curved around my shoulders, hung over me like a waiting veil. The hum sank lower, so low it scraped against the inside of my chest. It was no longer outside of me. It was inside. I closed my eyes. My breath fell out uneven, shallow. When I opened them, the walls had edged nearer, not by much, but enough to see the corners sharpen. The room was shrinking, or I was swelling inside it. I whispered a word, just to hear my own voice. The hum answered. The plaster seemed to ripple in slow waves, as if absorbing what I'd given. I stood quickly. My chair groaned against the floor, but even that sound felt muted, devoured by the air. The wallpaper trembled. I thought I saw something shift beneath it, a shadow, darker than the rest, moving, as if rolling beneath the skin of the room. I backed away. But there was nowhere to go. Each wall throbbed, in and out, closing around me with the rhythm of my own body, my own betraying pulse. I wanted silence. I held my breath. And in that pause, the walls stopped, still, flat, as if they had never moved at all. The dust froze mid-air. Every swirl halted. Even the hum drained away. It was only me, my blood pounding in my throat, my ribs straining. And then, a single exhale. Not mine. It pressed warm against the back of my neck. I turned. There was no one. Only the wall, waiting, pale in the moonlight. The plaster expanded, slow, deliberate, not matching me anymore. It had chosen its own rhythm. I stepped back, heart racing, and the pulse in the walls did not follow. It beat slower, stronger, steady, like the heart of something vast. The dust drifted toward it, sinking into the breathing skin. The wallpaper smoothed itself as though satisfied. The hum returned, but softer this time, almost gentle. I stood very still. The walls alive. Me, just an intruder, breathing in their rhythm, caught in a body not my own. And I understood. This was not my house. It was theirs. I closed my eyes, letting the silence settle against me. Not daring to move again, the walls inhaled and waited. The nights had grown colder. I remember the pale glow of autumn pressing against my window. The house felt heavier during those weeks, as though the air itself had grown tired. I had been lying in bed, listening to the hum of the heater, the kind of steady, low breath that fills an empty room. My eyes followed the ceiling, faint shadows stretching, retreating. And then I noticed it. The door to my bedroom, shifted. Not wide, not fast, just a slow, fragile inch of movement. The hinge whispered, a soft creak that didn't belong to the rhythm of the night. I froze, my chest tightening against the stillness. A sliver of pale light slipped through the crack, thin as a blade. Not warm, not golden. It didn't feel like light at all. It spread along the floorboards like liquid shadow, drifting forward. Reaching toward the corner of the room, I didn't move, didn't breathe. And then when my eyes adjusted, I saw the hallway, or what should have been the hallway. The carpet was wrong. It stretched further than it should have. The edges blurred into shapes that bent like water. No sound. Not even the settling bones of the house. I blinked, and the door eased again. Another inch. Another breath of that pale light spilling in. The hallway had shifted. The pictures on the wall, long frames, were gone. Instead, the wallpaper had peeled, curling like old skin. Every inch of it looked damp. I turned my head, only slightly. The heater still hummed. Steady, calm, as though nothing had changed. But I couldn't ignore what stood before me. The silence pressed harder. The kind of silence that makes the inside of your ears ring. I thought I heard a rustle, but there was nothing. The door moved again. Wider now. My heart stuttered. The hallway no longer fit inside what I knew. It stretched into a darkness I couldn't measure, shadows pooling into each other. Like someone had built a hallway from a dream and left it open behind my door. I wanted to shut my eyes, to make it vanish, but the pale light kept sliding into the room, soft, unbroken, spilling closer to the bed. I whispered into the air, though no one was there. The words caught in my throat, and still, the door leaned wider, not by my hand. Something subtle shifted inside that hallway. The air bent. A shape lingered, though faint, almost formless. I thought it leaned toward me. I couldn't hear footsteps. No breath, just the stretch of the silence. It filled the space where a voice should be. The door stilled. Half open now, the pale light flooding, swallowing the last corners of my room. The hallway seemed endless. My skin prickled. I thought of getting up, crossing the room, closing it myself. But the thought of touching that wood, feeling the chill from the other side, froze me to the sheets. My hands locked in place, The shadows in the hallway began to shift, like fabric brushing softly, like something unseen had stirred, and then nothing. The silence returned, the kind that swallows even your own breathing. The pale light trembled as though it pulsed with something alive. I waited, minutes, maybe longer, but the door didn't close again, and the hallway never went back to normal. Even now, I can see it if I try. The memory of that doorway, a space that wasn't mine, yet reached inside my room, waiting, quietly, behind the wood. Sometimes, when I wake in the dark, I swear I hear the hinge stir. A soft breath of light slipping through, as though the door remembers me, and it still wants to open. The house was still. Late evening. Pale light slipping through the curtains. I'd been alone for hours, but the guest room wasn't quiet. A hum lingered there, low, persistent, like something electrical, but softer. Too soft to belong to any machine. It made the air tremble. I stood in the hallway, listening. The walls carried it. It seeped beneath the door. My breath felt uneven. Every time I tried to walk away, I found myself stopping, turning back. Drawn to that sound, dust drifted in the dim light above the threshold. But the windows were closed. There was no draft. I opened the door. The hum deepened like it noticed me. The guest room smelled faintly of metal, like iron left out in the rain. My skin prickled as I stepped inside. Shadows gathered in the corners, pooling thick, as though the light dared not reach there. I whispered hello. The hum faltered, then grew sharper before vanishing. Silence. Heavy, unnatural silence. The air pressed against my ears, thick and full, like the weight of water. I swallowed, but the pressure didn't lift. My eyes moved across the room. Bed stripped bare. Furniture covered in sheets. Nothing out of place, except the dust. It swirled gently in the center of the room, a slow spiral, as if stirred by an unseen hand. I stepped closer. The floor creaked beneath me. Still, the dust moved. I watched it circle, endlessly, without cause, like a breath I couldn't hear. A pale shadow lingered in the corner, not moving, not shaped like anything familiar. My chest tightened. The silence had weight, and yet I thought I could hear something buried beneath it. Not a hum anymore, something smaller. Almost like a murmur, I leaned closer to the swirling dust, but it slowed, drifted apart, as if it knew. The shadow in the corner thickened, like fog pressed into a shape. I couldn't look away. The silence began to ring inside my head, a hollow echo, like a tuning fork struck against bone. My throat felt dry. I whispered again, though I don't know why. The shadow shifted, and for a moment, I thought I saw it lean forward. The pressure in the room broke suddenly. The hum returned. Low, rising, vibrating through the floorboards, it rattled my chest. It grew until I thought it might fill me completely, but when I stepped back toward the door, it stopped. Gone. The silence rushed in like cold air, flooding every corner. I stood frozen, half in shadow, half in light. Nothing moved. Not the dust, not the corner, only me, breathing too loudly in a room that felt alive. I closed the door slowly, careful not to break the stillness, but as I stepped away, I realized something. The hum wasn't gone. It had shifted, fainter now, but following through the walls, through the silence, as though the room had learned how to breathe. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the street still glistened. Puddles shimmered under the lamps. I stood by the window, my breath faint against the glass. The fog outside had thickened. It clung to the air like a veil. At first, I thought I was alone. The street was quiet. Too quiet. Then, through the blurred haze, I noticed it. A shape. Just under the streetlight, pale, still. It didn't move, not once, but I felt it. The weight of its gaze pressing into me. I blinked hard. The fog shifted. Its outline wavered, almost dissolving, and yet it was still there, a figure. Unnatural in its stillness, I pressed closer to the glass. The pain was cold. I could see the faint tremor of my own reflection. Was it human? The mist made it hard to tell. Arms, maybe, but the body too long, too thin. The pale figure leaned, not forward, not back, just slightly off, as if the bones inside weren't built like mine. A car passed. Its headlights broke the fog. For a moment, the figure vanished. The street was empty again. Relief settled in me. My shoulders dropped. I almost laughed, but when the light faded, there it was, back under the lamp, closer. I hadn't seen it move, not once, but the distance had changed. I whispered to myself, a tiny breath. No. The figure stayed, watching, unmoving. My chest grew tight. The hum of the streetlight grew louder. It buzzed, faint, like static. The mist wrapped around its shape, sometimes hiding it, sometimes revealing it. Each time it looked different. At one angle, its arms hung low, hands brushing its knees. Another, its head tilted too far to one side, like it was listening. I rubbed my eyes. The window smeared. The fog outside thickened. Still, I could see it. The pale figure. Too white against the gray, I backed away. Slow steps. The floor creaked. And still, I felt it watching. Even when I couldn't see its face, the silence pressed harder. Every corner of the room seemed heavier. Like the air itself was waiting. I wanted to turn away, to walk upstairs, to close my eyes and let the night pass. But something inside me whispered, if I left the window, if I turned my back, it would come closer. So I stood there, breathing shallow, watching the fog breathe with me. Minutes passed. Or maybe longer. The pale figure never moved, but the fog, it carried it. Each curl of mist reshaped its body. Its edges blurred, then sharpened, as though it wasn't bound to flesh at all. The lamp above flickered. For 1 second, darkness swallowed the street. When the light returned, the figure was gone. My throat tightened. I leaned closer, forehead against the cold glass. The street stretched out, empty, silent. And then, directly across the glass, a reflection, not mine, pale, still, standing inside the window's surface. Watching me, I froze, my breath shallow. The reflection did not blink. Its body, impossibly tall, folded slightly against the glass. And just as I gasped, the mist outside swirled again. The streetlight flickered once more. When it steadied, the road was empty. The reflection gone. But I swear, in the faint hum of the night, I could still feel its gaze, lingering, just beyond the glass, waiting for me to look again. It was the deep hour, the one where silence feels heavier than darkness. I remember glancing at the clock in the hallway. It had always worked, a gentle tick steady through the nights. But when my eyes landed on it, the hands were frozen. 17 a.m., not a second more. I blinked, waiting for the tick that never came. The pendulum hung still like a breath being held. The house didn't feel empty. But it didn't feel alive either. A faint scratching rose from inside the wall. Slow, measured, like nails tracing wood grain. I held my breath, listening. The sound paused when I noticed it. Then started again, closer, almost beneath the frozen clock. I turned toward the window. Outside, the fog pressed against the glass. It didn't drift or curl like fog should. It leaned in. As though watching, the glass moaned softly, strained under pressure. I touched the pane. Cold, too cold, like ice. Behind me, the silence grew heavier. The air felt stretched, as though the minutes weren't moving. My phone screen glowed, but even there, 3:17 remained. I tried refreshing the screen. Swiped down once, twice. No change. The scratching in the wall grew more insistent. Not frantic, no. It was deliberate, as if something was trying to mark its way through. The floor beneath me creaked. Not from my weight, from something shifting deeper in the house, I whispered to myself, just to hear a human voice. But the sound came back hollow, like an echo in an abandoned place. The fog thickened outside. Shapes stirred in it, shadows that didn't match trees or branches. They pressed closer, and the glass wept with condensation. I stepped back into the hallway. The frozen clock loomed above me, hands locked at 3:17. The brass rim was pale, dull, like it had aged 100 years in an hour. The scratching stopped, and for a moment, it felt as though the house leaned toward me, listening. My breath clouded in the air, but the heat was on. Every vent hummed softly, yet the air was cold enough to sting my skin. I pressed my fingers against the wall under the clock. The wood vibrated, a faint pulse, steady, as if the wall itself had a heartbeat. I pulled my hand back, and the pendulum twitched. Just once, not a swing, not motion, a single shiver. I felt it then. Time wasn't gone. It was waiting, holding its breath the way I was. I tried to move toward the stairs, but the house had grown strange. Longer than it should have been. The distance stretched, each step swallowed by silence. From behind the fogged glass, a pale face surfaced. Not pressed against the window, not formed of mist, but suspended inside it. It didn't move. It only drifted there, watching me through a film of frost. The frozen clock ticked once, sharp, too loud, then silence again. The scratching returned, faster now, urgent. I could feel it traveling upward through the wall, toward the ceiling, toward the attic I never opened. The fog outside bled into the corners of the hallway. It slipped beneath the window frame, soft tendrils brushing the floorboards, like breath curling across a mirror. I tried to speak, to call the hour out loud, but my voice broke, and the word never formed. The pendulum jerked again, and with it a low hum rose in the air, not mechanical, not human, something in between. I backed away, my eyes on the frozen face in the glass. But it was gone now. The fog outside was blank, swelling thicker against the house. My phone flickered. 3:17, always 3:17. The scratching stopped. The silence pressed in, and then, from the attic above me came a single soft footstep. I looked up. The ceiling seemed to bow under a weight I couldn't see. Dust sifted down in pale threads, catching in my breath. The frozen clock whispered its tick again. Just once, no more. I closed my eyes, hoping the world would move, that time would break free. But when I opened them, everything was still. The clock, the fog, the waiting silence. And I knew 3:17 would last. As long as it wanted to, it was late. The kind of late where the house feels suspended. No ticking clocks. Just the weight of night pressing against the windows. I was walking down the hall when I heard it. A sound so out of place, so delicate. Soft laughter, childlike. It came from below, the basement. I stopped at the top of the stairs. Every breath caught in my chest. The floor beneath me gave a groan. Wood stretching under my hesitation. I waited. But the laughter continued, light as a feather. It darted across the walls, sometimes close, sometimes buried in the dark. I pushed the door open. The hinges whispered as if trying to warn me. Cold air spilled out, a smell of damp concrete and rust. I stood there, listening. The faint giggle curved upward, echoing, familiar but not. I whispered hello, but my voice fell flat. The silence swallowed it whole. And then, another laugh. It didn't answer me. It teased. It lingered in the corner where the light bulb didn't reach, shadows folding over shadows. I stepped down. One board, then another. The staircase trembled as if carrying more than me. The laughter skipped to the far side of the basement, then back again, as though a child was running circles. But I couldn't see anyone. The walls felt too far apart. I knew this basement. Narrow, low ceiling, cluttered shelves. But tonight, it stretched wider. My footsteps echoed long after I stopped. The hum of the bulb flickered above. Dust drifted in slow spirals. And the air grew colder. The laughter didn't stop. It only multiplied. One giggle, then two, then overlapping tones. Like children hiding in every shadow, I pressed my hand against the wall. Concrete, damp, and real. But when I turned, the wall seemed gone. Just a hollow stretch of dark. I kept walking, even when I knew I shouldn't. The sound led me deeper. Floorboards no longer under me, just earth. The laughter thinned, becoming breathless. It came from behind me now, then beside me. Then above, brushing past my ear, I froze. Something small darted in the corner of my eye. low to the ground. But when I turned, nothing. The bulb behind me was gone. The stairs, too. I was inside a basement that wasn't mine. It stretched endlessly. I whispered for it to stop. For them to stop. The laughter broke apart into little gasps, almost like sobs, but playful still. Something touched my sleeve. Light, cold. A child's hand, but no child. Only the air moving around me. I backed away, but every step echoed wrong. Too slow, too hollow, like I was walking inside a bell. The laughter pulled upward now, toward the ceiling beams I couldn't see. It rose like smoke, and then silence, a silence so sharp it rang in my ears. I waited. Nothing. Not even my own breath felt like mine. I turned back, searching for the stairs, but there was only shadow, a pale light far off, and the faint outline of a doorway. I walked toward it, each step heavier. The air pressed down like water, and just as I reached the frame, the laughter returned, softer than before, just one voice. Trailing off as though stepping further away, I didn't follow. I couldn't. I stepped through the doorway instead. Back into my basement. The bulb buzzed faintly overhead. The shelves were there. The old boxes, the tools, everything in its place, except the basement door behind me was wide open. And from the top of the stairs, a single laugh drifted down. Not from below. From above, the house was quiet. Too quiet for autumn. Leaves outside brushed faintly against the window, but inside, it was still, cold, heavy almost. I stood in the hallway watching the pale light stretch across the wooden floor. The boards didn't look steady. They shimmered, just a little, like ripples moving through water. When I stepped forward, the surface shifted beneath my weight. Not creaking, not breaking, just moving gently. It felt wrong beneath my shoes. Like the wood wasn't solid anymore. Like it remembered something I didn't. I kept walking. Every few steps I would stop. And when I did, the floor stopped too. But when I looked away, when I blinked, it moved again, almost as if it was breathing beneath me. In the kitchen, the table waited. A glass, a small plate, an old candle stub. The things I had left there the night before. I knew their places exactly. But now, the candle had leaned a fraction to the left. The glass stood closer to the edge than it had before. I didn't touch them. Still, when I turned away and looked back, they weren't where I'd seen them last. I whispered to myself. Maybe I had forgotten. Maybe I was tired. But the room whispered back. Not words, not sound, just the subtle pressure of a presence. Something shifting against the silence. The walls held it. The floor carried it. The air seemed full of it. I walked slowly. Every board that rose and fell beneath me felt like the house was testing my steps, guiding me towards something unseen I didn't want to follow, but I couldn't stop moving. Shadows pooled at the corners. They didn't fade with the dim lamp's light. Instead, they thickened, gathered. Their edges curved as though they had shape, waiting to be recognized. I felt my throat tighten. I listened harder, and in the shadows I swore I heard a low, steady whisper. A hum, barely carried on breath. The house was remembering me. I pressed my hand to the wall. It was warmer than my skin, almost alive, almost listening. Each picture frame along the hall tilted slightly, not broken, just off. A few degrees from where they should hang, the shifting floor carried me further. Every step an echo, every echo slightly delayed, as though footsteps were following, just a moment behind my own. I turned fast. No one was there, only the candle on the table. Now placed in the center, perfectly upright, I couldn't breathe. The shadows swelled once more. They stretched across the floorboards like spilled ink. But when I stepped back, the boards lifted, carrying the shadows with them, letting them flow like water. It was then I realized. The house wasn't simply moving. It wasn't bending with time or age. It was keeping record. Every step I had taken, every object I had touched, every shadow I had cast, it remembered. And it was showing me. The floor shifted again, rippling outward in a slow circle beneath me. A memory rising to the surface, a presence woven into wood and nail. I thought of all the years this place had stood, all the voices it had absorbed, all the secrets pressed into its grain. It held them, all of them. And now it wanted me to feel them too. The air thickened, humming with the weight of things unsaid. The walls leaned closer. The floor rose slightly like breath against my soles. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I only listened. The whispering shadows bent and curved until they resembled figures. Not clear, not full, but present enough to know they were there. They leaned, tilting toward me, pooling along the rippling floor. Their silence was louder than any voice, and then everything stilled. The boards froze. The objects settled. The whispers hushed, as if the house had taken its memory back, and closed it away again. But when I placed my hand against the wall once more, I felt it. That faint pulsing warmth, like a heartbeat beneath the wood. And I knew it wasn't over. The house still remembered. Every step, every shadow, every breath, and now it remembered me. The night was still, the kind of stillness that feels heavy, like the air itself was listening. I remember standing in the kitchen. The overhead light hummed, pale, buzzing faintly, casting that dull yellow glow across the counter. And that's when I saw it. A key. Small, rusted, its teeth jagged, edges crumbling like something pulled from the bottom of a well. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. The counter was bare when I left the room earlier, but now it waited. I didn't want to touch it. But I couldn't look away. It felt wrong, somehow heavier than its size, like it carried weight that wasn't its own. The shadows near the cabinets seemed thicker, almost swollen, corners of the room bending softly, as though the key pulled them closer. I breathed out, and the hum of the light flickered. My skin prickled. I reached forward, slowly. The cold of the counter seemed to rise into my fingertips before I even touched it, and then my hand stopped, because the key shifted. Not much, just a tilt, as though something invisible had nudged it toward me. I froze. Every sound in the house retreated. The ticking clock in the hallway, gone. It was only my own breath now. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was just the uneven counter, or my nerves. But I couldn't deny the way the shadows kept folding in. As if they were watching, finally, I picked it up. The rust crumbled against my skin. But the key was cold, unnaturally cold. It pressed into my palm like stone, like it wanted to leave an imprint, and for just a moment, I thought it pulsed. A soft throb, like a faint heartbeat. I dropped it instantly. The clang echoed louder than it should have, too sharp for such a small thing. It spun once, twice, then stopped. Perfectly upright, resting on its teeth. Keys don't balance like that. I stepped back. And the kitchen seemed longer than before. The shadows stretched. Walls pulled away from each other, tilting slightly. I whispered to myself, just leave it. Go upstairs. Forget it's there. But forgetting was impossible. Even when I turned off the light, even when I walked away, I could feel it. The weight of it pressing into the air like gravity bending around it. That night, I lay in bed, but the silence wouldn't hold. I heard faint rustling in the hall. Soft footsteps. Not heavy, but measured. Like someone pacing outside my door. I kept still, listening. The steps stopped, and then a metallic clink, like a key. Brushing against wood, I shut my eyes. But the sound threaded through the darkness, sinking deeper. A key sliding against a lock that didn't exist. When I opened my eyes again, the room had changed. The corner near the dresser was darker than the rest. And in that darkness, I thought I saw movement, not shape, not form, just a shifting, like a breath pressing against the fabric of the air. I turned on my side, facing the wall, and told myself it would fade. But the silence only grew, thicker, until all I could hear was the faint hum beneath my skin, a rhythm that wasn't mine. By morning, the key was gone. The counter was empty, as if it had never existed. But I knew better, because every corner of the house still carried that same weight. Every shadow leaned closer than it should. Every silence held too long. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I still feel the outline of that key pressing into my palm. Not sharp, not cold, just heavy, like something that hasn't finished unlocking. Yet it was late evening. The house was quiet. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. The living room felt ordinary. Warm light spilling across the carpet. The smell of old wood. The chair had always been there, tucked neatly against the far corner. I wasn't thinking about it. Not at first. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and came back. That's when I noticed the space. The chair was gone, not moved. Not tipped over, just gone. An empty patch of carpet where its legs had pressed down for years. Indentations still there, but no chair. I froze. The room felt too open, like a tooth pulled from a mouth, the hollow space aching where something had been. The air shifted. A faint metallic scent lingered, sharp at the back of my throat. Almost like rust, almost like blood. The light above me flickered, once, then steadied. I stepped closer to the empty corner. Every sound in the house seemed thinner, stretched. The tick of the clock, slower than before. I blinked, expecting the chair to return, expecting my eyes to adjust, to make sense of it. But there was only carpet. Flattened fibers where wood should have been. A hollow presence seemed to cling to the space, the way a shadow lingers long after movement stops, as if the chair had left something behind. I turned my head quickly, scanning the rest of the room. Every shape felt unstable, like they might vanish too if I looked away. The table seemed further from the wall. The lamp, tilted slightly, though I hadn't touched it. The rug's edges curling as if the floor had shifted underneath. I whispered aloud, though I don't remember what I said. My voice sounded swallowed, dulled. The air pressed heavier on my skin, each breath thinner, like the house itself was holding something in. I sat down on the couch, across from the empty corner. I told myself to wait, to see if it would come back. The silence grew brittle, like glass about to crack. The clock hand stuttered, not forward, not back, just trembling in place. The lamp flickered again. The metallic scent grew stronger, and the carpet's indentations seemed deeper than before, almost like the chair's legs had sunk further, into a floor that was no longer solid. I shut my eyes, but even in the dark I saw the outline. A negative space burned against my mind. When I opened them again, the corner looked wider, the shadows pooling thicker than they should. Almost shaped, like something crouched there, I whispered again. My own breath came back colder. The refrigerator hummed louder from the kitchen, then cut off mid-cycle, leaving a silence that roared. The house no longer felt like mine. Each glance revealed the possibility of change. Walls that might stretch, objects that might vanish. I couldn't take my eyes off the corner, that empty patch of carpet. So ordinary, so final. I leaned forward, listening. There was no sound, no rustle, only the faint pulse in my ears. The clock ticked once, but the second hand didn't move. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. Not from fear exactly, from something thinner, colder, like being drained, and when I looked back up, the couch felt smaller beneath me. Like the room itself had taken something more. The hollow space was spreading, breathing, patient. I whispered the chair's name, as if it had one, as if it might answer, but the silence stayed. And I knew. It wasn't the chair that had left. It was me. And soon, the room would notice. The nights were colder that week. Late autumn. A pale moon sinking into fog. I remember the house felt quieter than usual. Like the walls were listening. Like the silence had thickened. I was sitting near the old radiator, listening to its soft hum, letting the warmth seep into my arms. That's when I heard it. A faint tap. Against the window behind me. At first I thought it was a branch, just a twig shifting in the wind. But the trees in the yard had been bare for weeks. Another tap. Sharper, deliberate. I turned slowly. The glass looked blurred, fog pressing against it like a hand. Moisture traced down the pane in crooked lines. I held my breath. The tapping came again. Perfectly steady this time. I told myself not to move. Not yet. But my body betrayed me. One step, another. The old floorboards sank under my weight. With each step forward, the tapping grew louder. As if whatever was there, knew I was coming closer. I leaned in close enough to see my reflection, but it wasn't my reflection. The mist swallowed my face, leaving only a pale shape. The taps continued, slow, measured, almost in rhythm with my heart. I reached out. My hand hovered above the glass. The cold radiated through before I touched it. And then, silence. The tapping stopped. So sudden it made my chest tighten. The fog shifted. I thought I saw movement. Something darker pressing against the other side, but there was nothing clear. Just a shadow that refused to form into anything solid. I whispered to myself, "It's just condensation. Just nerves," and yet my pulse wouldn't slow, because I knew the window was locked, and no one should have been able to reach it. The house sat high above the ground. 2 stories up, no ladder, no ledge. Still, tap the sound struck the glass again. This time harder, I staggered back. My heel caught the edge of the rug. I nearly fell. Silence returned, thick and endless. Only my shallow breathing filled the room. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't resist. I inched forward again, careful this time, eyes fixed on the window. Searching the fog for any sign, the glass was trembling. Not violently, just the faintest vibration as though a fingertip traced across it again and again. I pressed my palm flat against it. The cold stung my skin, and underneath, I swear I felt the faintest answering pressure. Not from me. From the other side, a breath caught in my throat. I stumbled back, clutching my hand. The fog thinned suddenly, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw a face. Pale, distorted, features smudged like paint in water. Its eyes, too dark, too wide. The tapping started again, but now it was frantic, erratic, a desperate rhythm that no longer matched mine. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The mist pulled away, dissolving into the night air. The window cleared. Only the empty yard below stared back. No figure, no shadow. Just damp earth and the thin outline of dead branches. The tapping ceased. The silence returned. I forced myself to unlock the latch, to push the window open just enough to lean out. The night air was colder than it should have been, and yet... Still, no sign of anything at all. I closed it quickly, turned the lock again, backed away. The radiator hummed softly, almost like before, but the warmth no longer felt safe. It felt fragile. Every beat of my heart echoed that same rhythm, that same tapping, even when the window remained quiet. And when I lay down that night, I could still feel the glass beneath my hand, cold, waiting. I kept listening for another tap, and in the pause between breaths, I almost believed I heard it, soft, faint, from the other side of the dark. The night was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual hum of the streetlights seemed swallowed by the fog that pressed against the glass. It had rolled in slowly, but by now it was thick, a wall of gray, smothering every edge of the world outside. I stood at the window, bare feet on the wooden floor. Breath caught in my throat. The glass was cold. Colder than it should have been. Somewhere beyond the fog, a pale light moved. Not steady, but pulsing. Like a heartbeat. It drifted left, paused, then glided right again. I leaned closer, straining to make out more. But the fog only folded and unfolded, reshaping itself with every movement. For a moment, I thought I saw figures, outlines, like people standing, motionless deep inside that gray ocean. But as soon as I focused, they dissolved, gone. Still, the light remained. A soft throb, a pale rhythm, and it was watching me. I could feel it. Patient, unhurried, my reflection in the window looked strange. Faded, hollow-eyed. It was as if the fog had crept into the glass, thinning my own shape. I touched the pane. The condensation there felt like breath. Not mine. The light pulsed again. Stronger this time. Closer. I backed away, but the room felt smaller than before. The walls leaned in, heavy with silence. Somewhere inside the fog, something shifted. Not a sound. More like a weight, a presence. The floorboard behind me creaked, but no one else was here. I turned. The hallway was dark. Still. When I faced the window again, the light had split into two, twin orbs, pale and unblinking, watching. My chest tightened. The air felt thick, damp, like I was already breathing fog. I whispered, though I didn't mean to. "Go away!" The orbs did not move. Instead, the fog seemed to breathe, pulling in, releasing out, a rhythm that matched my own lungs until I wasn't sure if I was breathing or if it was breathing through me. The pale light flickered. Shapes stirred again. Arms, shoulders, faces half formed. One figure lingered longer than the rest. Its head tilted slightly. As though curious, I blinked. And the window was empty. Just gray and silence, but the fog was thicker now, pressing harder. Like it wanted inside. I stepped back until the wall touched my spine. The heartbeat light pulsed once more, then dimmed. Darkness. For a moment I thought it was gone, but then faintly the glow returned. Not outside, not in the fog. It was inside the room, a pale shimmer bleeding across the wooden floorboards, sliding toward me. I couldn't move. Every muscle locked. The silence was louder than any scream. The light reached my feet, cold, tingling, almost electric. It lingered there, like a question waiting to be answered. I dared to look up. The fog was pressed against the glass so thickly now it looked solid. Like a wall of stone, breathing slow, I thought I heard footsteps in it. Soft, measured. Then, a whisper. Too faint to catch, but I knew it was my name. The light at my feet pulsed in time with it. Like it wanted me to answer. My throat was dry. I stayed silent. The whisper came again, closer, inside my ear. The pale glow dimmed, then blinked out. The fog receded from the glass, peeling back into the night. The world outside was empty once more, but the condensation on the window remained. And there, traced carefully in the dripping lines. "Was my name, I touched it." The glass was warm this time, almost alive. I stepped back, heart heavy, breath unsteady. The silence had returned, deep and consuming, and though the fog was gone, I knew it hadn't left. It was only waiting, patient, and the pale light was still beating, somewhere inside the dark. The house was still, but I wasn't alone. It began with a single creak along the hallway, wood bending under a weight that wasn't mine. I froze. My breath caught against the back of my throat. The silence after was too complete, as if the air itself was holding its breath with me. Then, the footsteps began, soft, measured, following. Each step sank into the carpet, pressing down the fibers. I could see the depressions forming, moving closer, but when I turned, there was nothing. The fabric rose again, smooth, as though no one had ever walked there at all. I whispered to myself that it was old flooring. That houses shift, that memory can play tricks, but I couldn't convince the quiet. It lingered, thick, waiting. I moved toward the living room, where the pale streetlight bled in through the blinds. The glow caught along the walls, stretching shadows farther than they should reach. They leaned, they bent, guiding my eyes into corners I didn't want to see. Each time I looked, the shapes dissolved, empty air. But the weight of being watched never lifted. The footsteps came again. Behind me this time, close, the soft hush of carpet sinking. A body that wasn't there. I didn't dare breathe. Even my heartbeat slowed, trying to stay unnoticed. I turned, slowly. The air cooled, brushing my skin like someone standing just out of reach. Again, nothing. I forced myself to walk. Down the corridor, past the old photographs. Their glass frames caught the light in narrow slivers. Faces blurred as if they'd moved when I wasn't looking. The pressure of steps followed in rhythm with mine. One behind each movement, never rushing, never stopping. When I halted, so did they. Perfectly. I reached the end of the hall, my hand trembling against the doorframe. The wood felt damp, though the house was dry. As if someone's breath had soaked into it, I turned toward the stairs. The carpet there sagged. Indentations descending one by one. I watched them form, pressed in by nothing. As though invisible feet were treading toward the lower floor, I gripped the railing. The wood hummed faintly beneath my palm. Not vibration, more like a pulse. When I stepped down, the impression stopped. Waiting, but the shadow on the wall beside me lengthened, stretching down, curling at the edges. It pointed toward the basement door. I whispered no, not aloud, only in my head. But the shadow seemed to hear. The line of darkness twisted. As if smiling, I hurried past into the kitchen, where the hum of the refrigerator should have comforted me. Instead, it sounded like static, broken, faltering. The footsteps returned. Inside the kitchen now, moving across the tile, no carpet to disguise them. But they made no sound. Only the faint displacement of air brushing the back of my neck. I could feel where the footsteps ended. Just behind me, I spun around. Nothing. Only the pale reflection of myself in the darkened window. My outline shivered, just a little too delayed, as though something else was moving in my place. The depressions on the carpet behind me had risen once again, smooth, untouched, yet the dread remained. Pressing down heavier than the night itself, I stood there, not moving, afraid the silence itself would break if I exhaled too loudly. The house waited with me, every corner swollen with something unseen. When I finally gathered the courage to step back, I felt the floor dip. Just slightly, as if someone had moved in perfect harmony. I didn't turn again. Not this time. The footsteps had already learned. They no longer needed to appear. And I understood with a sinking calm that whatever walked behind me would never leave. The night had been restless. Thin sleep, interrupted by whispers in the walls. By the time the first pale line of dawn crept in, I already knew something had changed. The air felt heavy, as if the house itself had grown lungs, and was drawing me in. With every breath, the curtains didn't move with the wind. They moved with something slower, deeper, a pull, then a release, like the inhale and exhale of something alive. I stood in the hallway, barefoot, the floorboards cold, each one shifting softly, not with my weight, but with the rhythm beneath them. It felt wrong, and yet steady, almost soothing in its repetition. Every shadow on the wall seemed to pulse, expanding, then shrinking, as if the darkness itself was stitched to that breathing. Black lungs inflating, deflating, around me. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, holding its own hum. I thought I could hear my heartbeat, but it wasn't mine. It came from the beams above. The plaster, the stone, a slow, cavernous thud. I pressed my palm against the wall. It was warm, not from the sun, not from the fire, warm, like skin. I froze there for a long time, my hand on the wall breathing beneath it. Every inhale made the hallway smaller. Every exhale gave me back space, as though the house was deciding how much room I deserved. I whispered to myself, quiet, nervous words I don't even remember now. The sound disappeared too quickly, swallowed, drawn into the rhythm of that inhale, that exhale. By the time I reached the kitchen, the windows were pale with morning. But the light didn't feel separate from the house. It felt owned, bent, filtered through lungs that had seen centuries. The chairs seemed to shift their angle, not by scraping, but by subtle tilting, as though gravity belonged to something else. I thought about leaving, but the moment I stepped toward the door, the inhale came, and the knob cooled under my hand. Like breath being drawn away from me, I waited, held still until the exhale came. Only then did the metal warm again, and I realized if I wanted to leave, I had to leave between breaths. I lingered in the living room, watching the walls flex in their shadow skin, feeling the ceiling lift and settle above me. And it struck me out how small I was here. How brief. The house wasn't creaking with age. It wasn't settling into the earth. It was alive, enduring, and I was the guest, not the owner, not the keeper, not even the inhabitant, just a momentary breath inside its lungs. The fire in the grate had died hours ago, yet the embers shifted, rising when the inhale came, falling back on the exhale. Ash moving with something unseen. I wanted to speak, to ask it what it remembered. But no words came. And I think the house already knew. The portraits on the wall watched me. Their painted eyes glistened in the strange light. Not wet, but full, reflecting the pulse of shadows around them. Faces I had never met, Yet somehow they remembered me. I felt my chest tighten. Not from fear. Not exactly. But from the pressure of existing inside something older. Something that held centuries in its lungs. Every step I took toward the stairs was careful. Not because I was afraid of waking someone, but because I feared disturbing the rhythm, the steady tide of inhale, exhale. I climbed, each board beneath me rising and falling, as if my steps were resting on the ribs of something vast, something that had been here long before I was born. At the top, I paused. My breath no longer matched mine. It matched its, and that realization made me shiver. The bedroom waited, but I couldn't go back in. Not after feeling the walls pulse around me. Not after hearing that low, cavernous heart beating behind the plaster. So I turned back and moved toward the front door. This time, when I touched the knob, I didn't hesitate. I felt the inhale draw back, a pause, a gift of silence, and I slipped through. The morning outside was still, the air crisp. Yet even in the open field, I could feel the house breathing behind me. Inhale, exhale. The roof seemed to lift. The shadows stretched in rhythm. And I knew. Even if I walked miles, it would remember me. I was no longer just a visitor. I had been inside its lungs, part of its memory, and I don't think I could ever truly leave. The sky grew brighter. But in my chest, I carried that rhythm, slow, endless. The breathing of the house.